Hello guys and welcome to Creative Academy. In this video we'll be looking at CSS. In our previous videos we've been talking about HTML and in this video we'll be starting CSS officially. So first thing to notice, there are three types of CSS. There are three types of CSS and CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Just note it, Cascading Style Sheets, and it is used to beautify your web. So you just like having a car, and when you paint the car, when you spray the car, spraying the car is just like adding CSS. So CSS is just there to start your work, to beautify it. Yes. So there are three types of CSS. We have the inline CSS, the internal CSS, and the external CSS. And we'll be exploring all of them in this video. So let's start with inline CSS. First off, let me write something. So p tag, and I have my name is OB. So inline CSS is a way of applying styles directly to a HTML element using the style attributes. So this here is actually a HTML element. So when I apply the style directly to this, it's called an inline CSS. The CSS is written inside this HTML tag. You can see this tag, this p tag. The CSS is written inside it using the style attributes, and it only affects this the element it's applied to. So let's say I come here now, you can see this p tag here. So shift and I will say style. Now, what do I want to style? I want to style this. So first I will say, okay, let me say the color, and I want it to be blue. Okay, so let's go live to preview this. So here on our server, you can see now it's showing my name is OB, but the text color is blue. Let me remove the style first of all. Let me remove the style so you see how it was before. So let's go back. You can see my name is Obi. It is black, which is normal default color. Now, when I decide to style it using CSS, inline CSS, I say style, enter, and I say is the color I want. So let me give it a different color, red. So if you come back here, you can see that the color has changed to red. Now I'm just trying to beautify, this text to modify it, to format it. That is the work of CSS. I can also decide, okay, after putting the color, come in front of this semicolon and we type the next thing. Next thing I want is font size. Font size, let's say 50 pixels. Now in web development, we make use of pixels, mainly pixels. There are other units of measurements, but I advise you make use of pixels. So let's go back to our website. So here you can see that the size of this text has increased. My name is Obi. The size has increased. So I can also decide to modify it further. So bring the cursor in front of the semicolon, and I'll choose something else apart from color, font size. There are other things. Let's say font width. Font weight is just like making it bold, and font weight ranges from 100 to 900. There's nothing like 120 or 110. So between 100 to 900. So let me assume I just say 500, and let's see what we have. Okay, it didn't really show what. Let's use something like 900. You can see that the thickness of this, you know, increased, unlike how it was before. So this is just how inline CSS work. You write, you style the HTML element directly. The style is being applied to the HTML element directly, to the HTML tag directly. So that's how inline CSS works. Now let's look at internal CSS. So I'll come and stay, write something. Let's use that same stuff. Okay, let me say my name is Jane, and next I'm I'm 13 years old. So we have this. Now for the internal CSS involves writing inside a style tag, which is within the head section. This is the head section. You can see this is the head section. So you can see that this is the head section. You click on enter, and under this head, or in this head section, that's where you're going to style your work. For the internal CSS now, it is very different from the inline CSS. To style in internal CSS, this is how it is being done. First of all, you introduce the style and you click on enter. So the first thing we have is the P. This is what we want to style. This. So we introduce our P and introduce a curly bracket. Now, inside this curly bracket, this is where we are going to style whatever we want to style. So let's say color, and we want the color to be aqua. So come here, you can see the both of them changed color to this aqua. Now, let's say I want it to be red, so it should be clear. You can see what we are doing. Red. So you can see it. My name is Jane. I'm 13 years old. It's been clear now. Color has changed. So this is another way we can actually style using CSS. This is what the internal CSS. Now, what if I want to, I just want to apply this red to this alone. So this my name is Jane. I don't want to apply it to this other one. This I'm 13 years old. What do we do? This brings us to what we call element selector, class selector, and ID selector. Now, using this P, it's called element selector. This P now is the element. What if this P now is the element? It falls under the category of element selector, which is I'll come here, P, this is a curly bracket, and then I'll just write the code. And to apply to all the tags that has P. Now for class selector, I will come here to this P and I will introduce the class. And I will name it name. So I'll name it name. Yes. And I'll come back to this one too. I'll introduce a class and I'll call it age. So when I'm writing the CSS or when I'm trying to style it, I'll no longer use this P here. I'll no longer use this P. Rather, I'll use the name that we'll use as the class. This class attribute. That's what I'm going to use, this particular stuff. I'll no longer use this P. So I'll erase this P and I will use this name. What is this name? Name. That's what I wrote there. So you will not just put name, you put it dot name. That dot now stands for class. So class what name dot name, and just the name we have this red. You can see just the name now. That my name again has this red, and this other one don't have it. Now I'll come back here. Let's go back to our code. Click on enter. And I want to style this other one, this class that I use as age. So I'll say dot age. Then I'll use a curly bracket. And color, I want it to be blue. So let's preview. You can see that it has its own color now. Blue. Well, this one is red. So we call this class selector. I've explained the element selector. Element selector is using the name of a tag, which is just that p tag, and all the codes that has the p tag. We change the style we apply to them. But for the class selector, you introduce a class and give it a particular name, which you use to style only that one that in only that code that has that class. So next one we're going to look at is ID selector. So what if I don't want to use this dot name? I don't want to use this class. We have what we call ID selector. It's almost similar to this class. So let me erase all of this. Okay, let me just start here. So here you just introduce an ID, enter, and it's still the same thing. I'll put its name and I'll come here to introduce an ID and I'll call this age. So the difference between this is you are using ID here, and then to style it, you just use this hashtag hash name, finish, and you come here to hash age. So that's the difference, and you can see it's still red, still blue. So the difference between the class selector and the ID selector is, for the class selector, we introduce class and then put the attribute, and to style it we call it dot whatever the attribute is. And for the ID selector, introduce your ID, and to style it we call it hashtag whatever your attribute is. That's the main difference between the class selector and the ID selector. Whereas the element selector will just style it using the p tag. So I believe it's been explained. So for the internal CSS, I will just write all my styling here under the style side, write everything here. Whereas my code, my HTML will be below here, and that's it. That's how it's been done. I can come here now. I can say I want to increase the font size, and I'll say I want this one to be 100 pixels, and for this one font size I want it to be 70 pixels. So come here. So you can see this is now bigger than this. This is 100 pixels and this is 70 pixels. And this is the work of CSS. Now we've I believe we've understood the difference between inline CSS and internal CSS. The key difference is internal CSS, you will style it directly on the tag. You can see here, we came directly to this p tag to style it. But for the internal CSS, you are styling it separately, just inside the heading tag. You can see heading here. So just inside the heading tag, this is where you are going to do all your styling. And under the internal CSS, we have element selector, we have class selector, and we have ID selector. Where I say element selector, you use the tag itself, like the p tag, and if the change or the styling will be applied to all the elements with that p tag. And for the class selector, you introduce the class and you give it a particular name or a unique name, which you will introduce in the styling as that unique name you gave it. Same thing applies to the ID selector. And this element selector, class selector, and ID selector applies to external CSS. It's not just limited to internal CSS, it also applies to external CSS. In fact, it is the same for both internal CSS and external CSS, but it doesn't apply to inline CSS because inline CSS you're already writing the CSS directly on the HTML, directly on the code. So for a professional web developer, it is not advisable that you should write or you should style your code directly. In fact, do not try using the inline CSS. Just leave the inline CSS. And for me, I will advise that you use the external CSS, which is what I'm going to show you guys now. External CSS. Because what we just want to see on this page is just your HTML, just your code. There's no need, showing us your styling and all of that. It's your code we want to see. We don't want to see your styling and all of that. So even the internal CSS, I won't advise using the internal CSS. I prefer using the external CSS. So let's head over to external CSS. So for the external CSS, I will come here, create a new file, and I will name it um anonymous. Let me just name it anonymous. Since the name of this file is anonymous. Anonymous.css, very important. .css, because the CSS file we are creating, and I'll click on enter. So this is a different file now, and this is called CSS file. Here we have our HTML file, and here we have the CSS file. So we'll not just go ahead and start, styling, whatever. No, we have to link this CSS file to our HTML file. Yes, we have to do that in order for our styling, to be effective, or for our styling to show. So external CSS involves writing all styles in a separate CSS file, which this is a separate CSS file, and then we link it to our HTML. So the step one is what? Step one is to create the CSS file. After creating the CSS file, You will link it to the HTML. Now let's go and link it. See, come here. Immediately after the title, just click on enter and link it. Just click on link, enter, href, and here under href, you write the name of um the CSS file. You can see there. It's showing now anonymous.css and enter. And that's it. We've linked it. It's very simple. So link, enter, and then you type in the name of the CSS and you are done linking it. That's all. Now, now that we are done linking it, we can now go back to our CSS and do any styling we want to style, whatever thing we want to do. So let's say I want to style the p tag. Let me show you guys now. You can see the p tag is still black, like everything is black now. So let's now start the p tag. So p, and I will introduce the curly brackets, enter, and I'll say color, and let's say blue. So if you can remember, I explained this as what? Just try to remember what I explained this as. I call this what? An element selector. Element selector, because we use the tag itself, which is the p tag, to style it. You can see here everything is blue. Okay, let me add something in this our code. Let's go to our HTML. So about J. Now let's come here. You can see our heading tag now. Now let's head over to our CSS. Now you can see that this p tag now, which is the element selector, it only apply this tag only apply to the tags that have p, or the elements that have p, which is this. My name is Jane and I'm 13 years old. Now this one that is just page one about Jane, it didn't apply to it. So let's tie this h1. So I'll click on enter and I'll click on h1, use the curly brackets and the color. I want the color to be red. So you can see that our heading has changed. This is still under the element selector. Now I'm trying to explain external CSS, which I say it is everything is just the same for internal and external. The only difference is internal we are writing everything is on the HTML page there, whereas external we are creating a different file for the CSS or the CSS styling. Now, what if I don't want this I'm 13 years old to be the same color with this my name is Jane? What do? I use the class selector. So come back to our HTML and I will introduce a class. I will introduce a class. So let's class. I'll say name and I'll introduce a class here too. And I'll say age. So you can either use the class or use the ID selector, whichever one. Now if you come here now, you can see that it's still showing blue. So let's effect the change. Come to our CSS and we change this to what dot name. Now only that first my name is Jane will be bearing that blue color. You can say it. My name is Jane will be bearing the blue color alone, and this will just be black color. So I hope I've been able to explain inline CSS, internal CSS, and external CSS, and also proceed further to explain element selector, class selector, and ID selector. Now let's do more on the styling on CSS. So let's say I want to style this heading tag. I want to add a border. Now there is something about this border. When you apply a border like this, you can impute three figures. Now those three figures stands for thickness, type, and color. Thickness, type, and color. So let's say I want the thickness to be 50 pixels. You click on shift, then the type, just put solid, and the color I prefer is in the black. So let's view our border. So you can see how thick our border is. Thickness, type, and color. Now let's reduce the thickness of this our border. Let's say 10, or let's say 5. Now you can see how our border looks like now. We reduce the thickness. So that's one of the styling in CSS. Now if you look at this border closely, let me show you guys something. You can see that it has sharp edges. You can see sharp edges, sharp edge, sharp edge. Now let's make the edge a kind of curved, and in CSS we call that border radius. So say border radius, let's give it 10 pixels, and you can see it now. The edges are now curved, kind of curved. This is how we can do this. Now let's look at another feature, another styling. We call it margin. For the margin, we have margin top, margin bottom, margin left. So first of all, let's explore margin left. Now for margin left, let's set to 50 pixels. Not really explaining much. I just want you guys to be seeing the effect. So what do you notice? The margin left will shift this border away from the edge of the screen by 50 pixels. So I can decide to apply it. Okay, I've applied for margin left. Let me do the same thing for margin right. Margin right. And I say 50 pixels too. If you watch too, it has shifted away 50 pixels away from the end or the edge of this screen. So that's the function of this margin. Okay, I also want you to shift it away 50 pixels away from this top. So I also come here to margin top, and I'll say 50 pixels too. Now you can see that it has pushed down our border by 50 pixels. And you can also do that for margin bottom. Now, the key thing I want you to understand is margin is for the border itself. Now, let's look at a different term called padding. Padding. We start with padding left, 50 pixels. Now, what did you notice? This text had to shift. Now, padding is for the text itself, which is the heading. Padding will shift the heading or the text from the border, like away from the border. So we shifted it 50 pixels away from the border. What if I also want to shift it like from the top and from the bottom? So I'll also do the same thing. Padding bottom 50 pixels, and I'll say padding top 50 pixels. Now, what did you notice? Our border increased first of all. Here it shifted it away 50 pixels away from the top, shifted 50 pixels away from the bottom, and 50 pixels away from the left. And you ask me, why is this space here? Why is this space, you know, much here? And this is because it is a block element and not an inline element. That's why this space is here, because the block element. I've explained that in our previous videos. Can you check it out? So I guess this is quite understood. Now let me remove this margin, padding, and this stuff. And let's say I want to increase the height of my border. So I want to increase it by 50 pixels. You can see that the height will be increased, and the width too. I can try to also decrease it. I want it to be just 50 pixels, so of being so big. So you can see that it actually reduced, it's even smaller. So let's say 100. 100, let's see how it is. 100 is still small. So let's say 400. Let's just do it 400. I think 400 is good enough. So these are different ways you can actually style your work, using CSS. There are a lot of styling. There is font weight, font size, padding, margin, a lot, color, border collapse, border radius, background color, and a lot. So in your free time, you can just decide to explore all of this. Just explore all this styling in CSS. But don't forget the main thing we talked about in this video. We talked about the types of CSS, which we said inline CSS, internal CSS, and external CSS. And we said inline CSS, you write the CSS directly in the HTML element. And for the internal CSS, we said you write the styling inside the style tag within the HTML, but it should be on the head section. The head section, you put all your styling there, but the styling comes first before the HTML codes. And for the external CSS, we said writing all the styles in a separate CSS file, and then you link it to the HTML file. Very, very simple. And we said for the internal CSS and the external CSS, we have what we call element selector, we have what we call class selector and ID selector. So this will be all for now. If you enjoyed the video, learned something, ensure you subscribe, like, and if you have any question, drop it in the comment section. See you in the next video.